system and muscular system. Today we'll talk about the nervous system. We have a lab to do, a couple of videos to watch. We have concussion articles to read and summarize. So we got a bunch of different things we'll be doing between now and next week. And then after this, we're going to move on to endocrine system. And you'll have next week, towards the end of the week, a combined quiz on nervous and endocrine together. SCI. All right, so let's talk about the nervous system. So the nervous system is our body's ability to take in information, integrate it, process it, and if necessary, respond to that information. Okay? And so the nervous system includes the organs of the brain, the spinal cord, and various nerves and sense organs that are throughout the body. So the brain is basically a mass of nerve tissue. That's sort of the central processing unit of our body's nervous system. All the information that's taken in through our senses goes to the brain where it is processed, and then the brain is able to send out instructions to various parts of the body to respond to those stimuli. An extension of the brain is the spinal cord. The spinal cord's purpose is to transmit these instructions, to act as a way for these messages to get from the brain to other parts of the body, and from various parts of the body in and up to the brain. And then connecting out to the various parts of the body from the spinal cord are the actual nerves. The nerves are made of nerve tissue that actually convey these signals from the spinal cord out.
Is this vice versa actually?
It means and the opposite as well. So it goes from the spinal cord out to the parts, and vice versa means from the parts to the spinal cord.
What language is it?
I don't know where it originates. I don't know the etymology of the sounds Latinish. I don't know about vice, but so we see here in this diagram, obviously the brain and the spinal cord, which travels down here, and then in green, what you see, those are the large nerves of the body that sort of you see spread throughout the body to convey this information from place to place.
So when you get hit on your neck,
Sometimes. So our nervous system gathers information from a variety of places. One such place are the senses. Seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling. These are our senses. And those are one sort of stimuli coming into the brain. You know, as you're right now, your nervous system is working on several tasks at once. As you look up at the overhead, light from the overhead goes into your eye, is focused on the retina of your eye, which then leads to the optic nerve, which brings this pattern of light and dark and color into your brain. There, your brain interprets these patterns and colors and deciphers them and sees the letters. And another part of your brain puts the letters together to form words and allows you to comprehend what the words say. At the same time that you're doing that, you're listening to my voice. As I speak, I'm vibrating air molecules in the room. They cause your eardrum to vibrate, which causes nerve impulses in your ear to travel into your brain, where your brain translates these vibrations into the words that I'm saying, and then you put those into a way that makes sense. You understand those words. At the same time, your brain is instructing the muscles in your arm and your hand and your wrist how to move in order to write the letters that you're using to write out your notes. So all of these various things are happening simultaneously by traveling through these pathways of nerves to and from the brain.
Like, what if the math gets something really complicated and we can't understand it? Not because our brain can't comprehend it or something?
sometimes, I mean, your brain changes, especially developmentally, as you go from an infant through, childhood and adolescence, and your brain matures and it changes in the way it understands various concepts, and those things change and develop over time. So examples of stimuli, we think lots of times of information from outside, but stimuli can also be internal. Okay, you can feel hungry. Okay, we have internal stimuli as well that our brain needs to take into account. And then responses are how our body reacts to these stimuli. Nicola?
Why are some people's ears more sensitive and they get really, really...
It's just because there is as in all parts of our body, there's variation. Some people have more sensitive hearing, and that changes over time as well. Like, have you ever heard, there are certain frequencies that as a person gets older, they can no longer hear, like what's called the mosquito ringtone, where you could put it on your phone, and then people that are older couldn't hear it, but younger people, like I'll play it, maybe at the end of class I can play it, but it has a series of high frequency sounds, and as a person ages, they have less ability to distinguish those high frequency sounds. So some of these sounds maybe you'll be able to hear, but I won't.
So like the high
Sort of.
So
No?
Julian.
Shh. If what?
Because I lost 30% of my hearing when I
It depends, how you can lose hearing in different ways. Sometimes people lose the ability to just hear certain frequencies, high or low. Other times people just lose general sensitivity to sound, so it sort of depends on that. So, John?
Animals, like, has like 10 times.
It depends on the type of animal and what they've adapted to hearing. All right, so we talk a little more specifically about the organs of the nervous system. The brain itself is a mass of nerve tissue that is made of hundreds of billions of individual nerve cells. A nerve cell is called a neuron. So our brain is a huge mass of these neurons. And they're all interconnected. And they form what we call neural pathways, from one neuron to the next. And the brain, again, takes in information, processes it, and then responds. Various parts of the brain have different functions. So our brain is not just like one mass that does everything. One portion of the brain is responsible for speech. Another part is responsible for vision. Another part for emotion. Another part for balance and coordination. Another part for involuntary action. So we have a variety of different brain regions, each of which have something to do. And probably tomorrow we'll watch a couple of videos that talk about some individuals who have had some damage to certain parts of the brain and have lost very specific types of function. Okay? But still, other parts are working just fine. So the brain is a unique organ in that way. Attached to the brain is the spinal cord. Spinal cord is basically an extension of the brain. It travels down from the very base of the brain at the base of the skull through the cranium, through the bones of the vertebrae. I'll pass around this model. I'll pass around a few things. This is a model of 3 vertebrae. Between each one is a disc of cartilage. If you know, maybe like a parent or grandparent has back problems, they may say they have a ruptured disc or something. We're talking about this cartilage here. If this cartilage gets damaged or gets swollen, it could start to move, it could stretch out of the vertebrae and start to put pressure on these nerves. And that could cause pain, numbness, a loss of use of a certain area. That's what those ruptured discs do. They put pressure on these nerves. So the spinal cord goes through the back here. There's a hole through each vertebrae. And then branching out of the sides are all these various nerves, which will then go lead to various other parts of the body. Okay. Now, so the spinal cord connects the brain to the nerves. acting as sort of an intermediary between the brain and all the nerves, and it's surrounded and protected by the vertebrae. Now, it's also why an injury to the spinal cord can be very damaging, because it can lead to what? Yeah, paralysis. And if you think about what the spinal cord does, it should make sense, because for you to walk to your next period class, your brain is sending information from your brain through the spinal cord. These messages are traveling all the way down to your spinal cord, out, and then they branch down here to nerves that go to all the muscles in your legs. So your brain tells those muscles what to do. So that message needs to get there. If a person damages their spinal cord, let's say they have a spinal cord injury over here, and the spinal cord is completely severed, so it's cut or broken. Well, the brain still is telling the legs to move, sending the message, but that message gets to this gap, and it can't go any further. So the muscles in the legs, they still are fine. They work, they would work, but they're not getting the instructions from the brain telling them what to do, telling them to move, so a person loses the use of their legs. When you have a person has a spinal cord injury, they will lose often the use of all parts of the body that are controlled below the injury. At the same time, if a person, to test what kind of spinal cord injury it may be, how severe, they may poke a person with a needle in the leg, which normally would cause pain, and that pain sensation would travel up to the brain and would hurt. But that message may get to that damage to the spinal cord and not be able to go any further, and not actually get up to the brain. No.
So if you were paralyzed, you would not feel pain at all in your legs.
If you're paralyzed because of a spinal cord injury, no.
So if somebody shot you in the leg,
No,
you
wouldn't know. Now, the higher up the spinal cord injury, the more dangerous and the more loss of functioning there would be. Because again, if it happens up here, now all these parts below that are controlled by all these nerves, they're not able to get that information from the brain either. So the higher up the injury, the more loss of various parts of the body there is. Until, an injury way up high at the top of the neck can lead to complete paralysis of both arms and legs. And the person may need to be on a ventilator because their control of their diaphragm is also impaired. So the problem is that nerve tissue does not heal like many other body tissues. If you get a cut, skin cells will reform to fill in that gap. If you tear a muscle, the muscle will regrow. If you break a bone, new bone tissue will form. The spinal cord does not heal in that same way. Basically, a complete severing of the spinal cord is pretty much permanent. Now, it's an area where doctors and researchers are actively looking at, okay, how can we encourage or how can we cause spinal tissue, nerve tissue, to regenerate like other types of body tissue. But as of now, they have no real good way of repairing that damage. Sophia?
So, if you said that you don't feel pain in your legs if you get a spinal cord injury, do you feel pain on the actual spinal cord?
What do you mean?
Like, you know how if you break a bone,
Yeah.
it hurts?
Yeah.
Well, what if you break your spinal cord? Does it hurt?
Yeah, it probably hurts. So, I mean, you lose the loss of anything above that
So
injury.
like above where you broke your spinal cord, that would hurt only?
Yes, pretty much.
If you also broke your arm, though, it wouldn't.
Well, if your spinal cord is down here, but you hurt your arm, those messages of pain can still get up through the nerves, up into your spinal cord here, into your brain. So you would still feel that. You could still use your arms.
So, there's some people who can't feel pain at all, but they can still move
Yes.
everything and stuff.
Some people are born without pain receptors.
Oh,
Which whenever we talk about that, there's always people that say, "Oh, that'll be awesome."
no,
But
that's very dangerous.
Right? Why? It's not awesome. It's actually a very
Dangerous.
very bad disorder to be born with, and oftentimes people born without pain receptors do not survive into adulthood, because loss of pain receptors is bad because pain has an actual purpose. And what is that purpose, Liam?
To tell your body that something's not good.
Yeah, to send the message that either there's been some damage to your body or something that's being done is damaging or injuring you in some way. When people are born without this sense of pain, some common injuries are poking their eyes, damaging their eyes, because it doesn't hurt when they rub or itch or poke their eyes, so you can very easily damage your eyes. Broken bones are very common because you don't put your limbs in certain positions because it hurts. You don't bend your leg in certain ways because it hurts, and if you continue that, you would dislocate your knee or break your knee. But if you don't feel those pain messages, then you don't know that that's doing damage, and you could dislocate, break bones. Burns are often something else that's a problem because a person can burn themselves but not actually understand that they're damaging themselves. Itches. You get a mosquito bite, you might scratch it for a while, but then it starts to hurt, and so you stop. But if you never feel those pain impulses telling you to stop itching yourself, people itch themselves until they have huge wounds. So there are all these various things that we don't really think about, but if you're sick, when a baby has strep throat or something, or an ear infection, we know because they cry. Because you take your son or daughter to the doctor because they're crying all the time, they're in pain. Well, if they don't have those pains, a lot of those sort of diseases go unnoticed, and they can cause illness or even death in the baby. People that do survive through infanthood and childhood, they have to be taught many of these things that sort of happen naturally, what not to do, how not to itch yourself, how to keep your tongue in the right spot in your mouth. Another thing is they bite their tongue all the time because they don't have that sensation of pain that makes it really hurt bad if you bite your tongue. Kiana?
So are they double jointed?
No, it's not. They're abnormal, everything except for this sense of pain. Julia?
Why do you feel pain when you work out?
Because you're doing damage to your muscle tissue. Small amounts of damage.
It's bad, but is it good?
It's bad. It's good because as you stress your muscles and they heal slightly stronger to adapt to this stress that you're putting on this. Now you may be sore, but when you heal, that muscle is going to be a slight bit stronger than it was before. And continued workout after workout leads to an increase in
You're running out of
strength.
time.
Yeah. Well, we got.
No,
We have 10 minutes.
Oh, and I also want to pass around two things: a spinal cord section from a cow and a sheep brain.
Yes.
Alright, so please don't smush the brain. You can you can pick it up on both sides, but just don't squeeze it because it will damage.
How did you get a sheep brain?
What's that?
That is awesome!
Alright, yes, Cormac. Question. Alright, what? Alright, guys.
Why does it happen when people break their legs or they get strong in their upper body?
I don't think that's actually true.
I think when
They may have to, like a person that loses the use of their legs may have to develop their upper body strength to be mobile. But it takes time to do it. What? Nothing.
Have you ever seen that?
I got it from the store.
You can buy a sheep brain.
Yeah, sheep brain depot. Sidra.
Sheep brain.
Well,
I got
this person was going to go get a sector, and then he had pains in his stomach. No, it was like he couldn't feel it at all. Like, this kept getting worse and worse and worse until he realized he was wrong because
Oh, real? Yeah, you don't get those signals that there's something wrong with you. You don't have that. Liam?
Matt was like, if someone goes blind, their hearing will get.
I don't know if that does it, but they have to develop their sensitivity.
Well, if someone is horrified,
What? Yeah, spinal cord. All right, we got to move on here. So, nervous system. The nervous system communicates using what we call nerve impulses. Nerve impulses use both electrical and chemical signals to transmit information from one part of the body to another. So a nerve impulse travels down a neuron, down a nerve cell from one place to another. We begin as a stimulus, which can be integrated by the brain, and then a response can then be sent out. So if we look at a neuron, one individual nerve cell, they have a very distinctive shape. This is a neuron, and they have various parts that you need to know. Noah, do you have a question?
I touch it, but I'm not allowed
Nicole.
This is a weird question, but does someone who doesn't feel emotions feel pain?
Yeah, you can feel pain without having feeling emotions. Well,
How is it possible to paralyze one side of your body?
that's usually a problem. That's usually because of a brain injury and not a spinal cord injury, because various regions of your brain control various parts of your body. So if you have a stroke or something, or bleeding or damage to one part of the brain, you could lose the functioning of just one part. All right, I need to move on here to neurons.
I just think it's weird that your right side of your brain controls the
Yeah.
left side of your body.
So a neuron is a nerve cell that can send and receive messages. You need to know the parts. So the main sort of largest part of the neuron is called the cell body. It contains in it the nucleus and other organelles. And then surrounding that cell body are these branches called the dendrites. And a neuron would have hundreds of these branches. And then attached to the cell body is sort of an elongated portion of the neuron called the axon. And then it ends at an area called the terminal.
The terminal, like in that part.
Yes, Oscar? Feel, you mean like emotionally? Yeah, you got the textures and temperature receptors, but not feelings. No, that's a different. All right. So let's talk about what these various parts of the neuron actually do.
What?
So the cell body, okay, sort of as the main headquarters of the cell, has the nucleus, other important organelles. The dendrites, those branches that are surrounding the cell body, you could think of them as sort of listening for messages coming in from other neurons. So each of these dendrites would sort of be listening in for a message that was being transferred from another neuron. And these dendrites take a nerve impulse, they turn it into an electrical impulse. Our neurons work using small electrical currents. And this is one reason why a shock or being electrocuted can be damaging to a person, because it interferes with the functioning of the nervous system. Our neurons fire using electricity. They convey information using these electrical impulses.
So basically, when you get electrified, it's gliding into you.
It's overriding your nerve tissue. That message then gets transmitted down the axon, which is the elongated part of the neuron, until it reaches the terminal, which is the end of one neuron. Once this message reaches the terminal, you could see there's a space between the terminal of one neuron. What is this over here?
That's the dendrites of another.
Yeah, that's the dendrite of another neuron, which would carry the message further, and so forth. But you see there's a gap there. There's a space between the terminal and the next dendrite. That space is called a synapse. And when the message reaches the terminal, what happens is it causes the terminal to release chemicals called neurotransmitters. And they flood into that space. And then they attach to the next dendrite, which conveys the message to the next neuron, and so forth.
Isn't there reason like alcohol and beer to go like it's like
Yeah, it can interfere with some of those the way those neurotransmitters work. Tomorrow we'll talk more about how nerves get transmitted.
Listen to us. Let's get
What?